The pain in my chest was the first thing. That told me I was still alive. The second was the cold metal table pressing against my back. I opened my eyes and saw white lights burning above me, and for a moment I thought I was back on the surface of Kethar 9, bleeding out in the red dust while my squad lay silent around me. Then the medical drone hissed near my ear, and I remembered I was on the Starship Remembrance 3 months after the ambush that should have killed me. My name is Marcus Hale, Sergeant 3rd, Terran Expeditionary Force, and I was the only man who walked out of that valley alive. The drone finished its work and rolled back. A voice came through the speaker. Above my head, Commander Briggs wanted me in his office. Now I sat up slowly, because sitting up fast made the world spin, and I pulled on the gray uniform that hung by the bed. My reflection in the metal wall looked like a stranger. Thinner, older, eyes that had seen too much and slept too little. I walked down the long corridor of the ship past officers who looked away when they saw me coming. Nobody knew what to say to a man who had watched his friends die because the Galactic Concord had lied about the enemy being gone from that planet. Commander Briggs was standing at his window when I entered. He did not turn around. He just said, "Sergeant, sit down." I sat. He was holding a date slate in his hand, and he kept staring at it like it had personally insulted him. Finally he turned to me. His face was red. He told me I had received a direct summons from the Vishar Lauren Imperium, from the Empress herself. I laughed. I could not help it. I thought it was a joke, some cruel prank from the officers who wanted me off the ship, but Briggs did not laugh with me. He slid the data slate across the desk, and I saw the seal of the Vishar Lauren throne burned into the top of the document. It was real. The Vishar Laurens are the oldest empire in this part of the galaxy, 7 ft tall, silver skin, eyes that glow in the dark. Their society is ruled by women, and their empress is chosen by blood and trial. Every 100 standard years the empress must go through something called the Revan. It is a series of 7 tests where champions from every major species compete for the right to stand beside her as her partner and co-ruler. Humans had never been invited. We were too new, too rough, too strange until now. I read the document twice. I still did not believe it. Briggs told me the Vishar Lauren Council had pushed for a human to be included this time. Political move, he said, something to do with trade deals and border agreements. The Empress herself had supposedly approved my name from a list of candidates. I asked why me. Briggs shrugged and said, "Because you survived Kethar 9, and because you have nothing left to lose." I wanted to argue, but he was right. My family was gone. My squad was gone. The only thing I had left was a uniform and a grudge against the universe. I was given 12 hours to pack. A Vishar Lauren shuttle was already docking with the Remembrance. I did not take much. Small bag of personal items, photograph of my mother, my service knife, which I was told I could not bring into the trials but could keep as a reminder of who I was. The ship that came for me was long and black, shaped like a curved blade in the inside, smelled like metal and something sweet I could not name. The Vishar Lauren pilot did not speak to me. She just nodded once and pointed to a seat I sat. The shuttle detached and I watched the Remembrance shrink behind us until it was just a dot of light among the stars. The journey took 4 days. During that time I read every file the Terran government had on the Vishar Lauren Imperium. I memorized names, ranks, customs, laws. I learned that the current empress was called Zyra Vishar Halcorn, and that she was only 29 cycles old, which for her species was still quite young. I learned that her 2 older sisters had been killed before she took the throne, and that nobody would say out loud who had killed them. I learned that the last 3 empresses had all died before their 50th cycle. None of them had died of old age. When we arrived at the Vishar Lauren throne world, I was not prepared for how beautiful it was. The planet glowed violet from orbit, with oceans of dark water and cities carved into mountains of black stone. The shuttle landed in a courtyard so large it could have held a small army, and I was met by a line of guards in silver armor. Nobody spoke to me. I was led through endless halls of polished obsidian, past paintings and statues older than human civilization, until I reached a massive door shaped like a closed hand. The door opened without a sound. Inside was the throne room. It was lit by floating crystals that gave off a cold blue light. Nobles stood along the walls, their eyes tracking me as I walked in. At the far end of the room, on a throne carved from a single piece of dark stone, sat the Empress. She was exactly as the files had described her, and also completely different. 7ft of silver skin, yes. Eyes like cut sapphires, yes. But there was something in her face I had not expected. Something tired. Something that looked almost like disappointment when she saw me. I stopped at the base of the throne and gave the bow I had practiced 100 times on the shuttle. She did not move. She just watched me for a long moment. And then she spoke. Her voice was low and clear, and she spoke perfect Terran standard. Sergeant Hale, she said. You are the human they sent, I said. Yes, Your Majesty. She tilted her head slightly. You know why you are here? I said I did. She said, I did not choose you. My council forced me to accept a human candidate. I did not want it. I want you to understand that. I nodded. I did not speak. She leaned forward slightly. You will die in the first trial, she said. The other champions have trained for this their entire lives. You have trained for war. This is not war. I suggest you prepare yourself for what comes. Make peace with whatever you believe in. That is all. I should have been angry. I should have felt insulted, but there was something in the way she said it that made me think she was not trying to hurt me. She was trying to warn me. I looked up at her and I said, Your Majesty, I do not have anything to make peace with, and I am harder to kill than most people expect. For just a second something flickered in her eyes, surprise maybe, or curiosity. Then her face went blank again, and she waved her hand. A guard stepped forward to lead me away. I was taken to the champion's quarters, a long hall of private rooms in the lower levels of the palace, and when I walked in, every head turned to look at me. There were 7 other champions. One was a Krellian, an HFT brute with skin like stone and arms thick as tree trunks. One was a Velari, a creature made of flowing liquid muscle with 3 eyes and hands that could bend metal. One was a Sharon psychic, tall and thin, with a smile that never reached his eyes. The others were just as frightening in their own ways. They all stared at me like I was a meal that had walked into the wrong room. Nobody spoke. Nobody had to. The message was clear. I was the weakest one here and they all knew it. I found my assigned room, dropped my bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the hard bed. My chest still hurt from the old wounds. My head was pounding and I had just been told by an empress who did not want me and by 7 fighters who wanted me dead that I would not survive the week. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, and for the first time in a long time I laughed quietly to myself because it was funny in a dark way. I had come here expecting to die, and now I was being told I would die. And somewhere deep down a part of me that had been sleeping since Kethar 9 started to wake up, because I had been told I would die before many times and I was still here. Somewhere outside my room a bell rang. Vishar Lauren voice announced over the speakers that the first trial would begin at dawn. I closed my eyes. I did not sleep much, but I rested and I thought about what the Empress had said and what she had not said. She had warned me. She had told me to prepare. An Empress who did not want me there would not have bothered to warn me. An Empress who wanted me dead would have let me walk in blind. There was something else going on, something I did not understand yet, but I would. I have always been good at figuring things out when my life depends on it. Dawn came too fast. The bell rang again, and I stood and I put on the gray training suit they had left for me. I walked down the long hall with the other champions. Nobody spoke. The Krellian shoulder checked me as he passed, hard enough to bruise. I did not react. I just kept walking. We were led into a massive underground arena carved from black stone, with seats rising up on all sides. Seats were full of Vishar Lauren nobles in colored robes, and high above us on a floating platform of silver metal sat the Empress. She was dressed in white and gold today, with a thin crown of pale metal on her head. She did not look at me. She did not look at any of us. She stared straight ahead like a woman watching something she had already seen too many times. A voice announced the first trial. It was called the Crucible of Breath. 8 champions would enter a sealed arena. Toxic gas would be released. The last 3 standing would advance. The other 5 would not. The rules were simple. The reality was that I had a standard human respiratory system, a basic combat filter mask, and about 90 seconds of usable air before the gas would start to work on me. The Krelian had 3 lungs. The Valari breathed through its skin. The Sharon did not breathe at all in the way I did. I was the only one in the room who was going to suffocate. I walked to my starting mark on the arena floor. I checked my filter. I looked up one more time at the floating platform where the Empress sat. This time she was looking at me just for a second, and in that second I saw it again, that flicker, that small thing behind her eyes that was not disinterest. It was something closer to regret. The gates sealed. The countdown began. The gas started to fill the arena, pale green and heavy, curling around my ankles like a living thing. My filter was already working harder than it was designed to. I could feel my lungs starting to complain. The other champions were spreading out, taking positions, waiting for the first kill to come. I had maybe a minute before I would not be able to think clearly. I took one deep breath through my filter, the last good breath I knew I would get, and I started to move because I had a plan. It was a bad plan, a desperate plan, the kind of plan that sane man would never try, but I was not a sane man anymore. I had not been sane. Since Cathar 9, I was something else. Now, something the galaxy had not quite figured out yet. And I was about to show them what a human could do when he had nothing left to lose. The gas thickened around me. The Kryllian spotted me first. He smiled, which on his face looked like a wound opening. And he started walking toward me with the slow confidence of a man who had already won. I let my shoulders sag. I let my knees start to buckle. I let him think the gas was taking me. I have always been good at playing dead. It was one of the few skills that had kept me alive on Cathar 9. And in that sealed arena, with the whole Vhaleran court watching from above, I was about to use it again. The Kryllian came closer, and somewhere high above us the Empress leaned forward in her seat. She did not know it yet, but she was about to watch something that no one in the history of the Revan had ever seen before. A human winning a trial he was supposed to lose. The gas kept rising. My vision started to blur at the edges. The Kryllian was 10 steps away. 9, 8. I kept my breathing shallow. I kept my eyes half closed. I let my body sway just enough to sell the lie. And I waited for him to get close enough that I could do the one thing I had come here to do. Survive. No matter what it cost. The Kryllian took another step, and I smiled just a little behind my filter. Because he had no idea, none of them did. The Empress did not know. The Council did not know. The other champions did not know. They had all looked at me and seen a man who was already finished, a weak human sent to die for a political gesture. They were about to learn that the weakest-looking thing in the room is sometimes the most dangerous, because it has nothing left to protect, and because it has already decided that if it is going down, it is taking everyone else with it. The Kryllian reached for me, and the first trial of the Revan began in earnest. The Kryllian's hand closed on the front of my suit, lifting me off the ground. Like I weighed nothing, his breath came out in a hot rush through the slits on his neck, and I could smell the metal and meat stink of a creature that had never lost a fight in his life. His other hand pulled back, ready to snap my spine with one blow, and in that single moment, with my feet dangling above the arena floor and the green gas curling around us, I did the thing he did not expect. I did not fight him. I did not struggle. I did not try to escape. I grabbed the breathing tube running from his filter mask to the small tank on his back, and I yanked it loose with everything I had left. The tube came away in my hand with a sharp hiss. The Kryllian's eyes went wide. He dropped me immediately because now he had a bigger problem than a half-dead human. The gas was pouring into his own mask, and his 3 lungs were already starting to react. He stumbled back, clawing at his face, trying to reseal the connection. I hit the floor hard and rolled. My own filter was struggling now, and black dots were starting to dance across my vision, but I was not done, not yet. I crawled to him while he was still panicking. He was huge, but panic makes every creature in the galaxy smaller. I reached up, pulled the filter mask off his face entirely, and I put it over my own. The seal was wrong for human skin, but it held enough. The clean air hit my lungs like a cold drink of water in a desert, and my vision cleared. The Kryllian collapsed beside me, still breathing, but no longer a threat. 2 down in a. The other champions had not even noticed Yet they were too busy watching each other. The Valari and the Sharon were circling each other at the far end of the arena. The Valari's liquid body was rippling strangely, which told me the gas was affecting it more than it had expected. The Sharon was smiling, which was never a good sign. I stayed low. I crawled along the wall, using the Krillion's filter, moving toward the exit gate. I did not need to win the trial. I just needed to be one of the last three standing. If the other four killed each other, I would not have to fight any of them. I just had to survive. The Valari and the Sharon finally came together. The Valari struck first, its arm stretching out like a whip of muscle. The Sharon did not move his body. He did not have to. I saw the Valari's head snap backward as if hit by an invisible force, and then its entire liquid body began to collapse inward. The Sharon had crushed its central mind node with a single psychic blow. The Valari fell apart on the arena floor, a puddle of dying tissue. The Sharon turned his head and looked straight at me. He had known where I was the whole time. He started walking toward me, slow, confident. His thin body moved through the green gas like a ghost. I stood up slowly and I put my back against the arena wall. My service training was useless against a psychic. You cannot punch a mind. You cannot dodge a thought. But I had one thing he did not have. I had been told my whole life that humans were one of the most mentally resistant species in the galaxy. Our minds are messy. Our thoughts jump from thing to thing. Our emotions run wild. It makes us hard to read, hard to control, hard to crush. I had never tested it before, but I was about to. The Sharon reached out with his mind. I felt it as a pressure behind my eyes, like a hand pressing into my skull from the inside. I closed my eyes. I did not try to block it. I let him in and I showed him Cathar 9. I showed him the red dust, the bodies of my squad. The moment I realized the Conquered had lied, the screaming, the silence after the screaming, the 3 months in the medical bay, the funerals I could not attend, every piece of pain I had been carrying for a year. I pushed into his mind all at once, like a flood breaking a dam. The Sharon stopped walking. He stumbled. His smile was gone. I opened my eyes. He was shaking. His hands had gone to his own head and he was making a low sound. That was not quite a scream. Psychics feel what they read. I remembered from the files. They experienced the memory as if it were their own, and I had just made him live through the worst day of my life in full detail in 1 second. He dropped to his knees. I walked past him. I did not touch him. I did not need to. He was done. Whatever Snort's fight was left in him was being used to push my memories out of his head, and that was going to take him longer than this trial would last. A horn sounded. The gas began to clear. The trial was over. I looked around and counted. The Kryllion was alive but down. The Valari was dead. The Sharon was kneeling and shaking. 2 other champions had killed each other in the far corner, and I had not even seen it happen. That left 3 standing. The Tryon, a creature like a living tree. The Caveran, a short but heavily armored fighter, and me. I had advanced. The arena gate opened. I walked out on my own 2 feet. Medical drones rushed in behind me to collect the injured and the dead. I handed the Krylion's filter mask to confused Vhaloran guard who did not seem to know what to do with it. I kept walking. I did not look up at the Floating platform, I did not need to. I could feel her eyes on me, every V. Haler and Noble in the arena was silent. Not cheering, not booing, silent like they had just seen something they did not understand. Good, let them wonder. I was taken to a private recovery room, where a V. Haler and medic looked me over. She did not speak to me, she just worked in silence, cleaning the burns on my face where the filter mask had sealed, poorly treating the small injuries I had picked up. When she was done, she left without a word. I sat on the edge of the bed and breathed, just breathed. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the after-battle shake, the body's way of releasing everything it had held back during the fight. I had learned to welcome it. It meant I was still human. The door slid open. I expected a guard. I expected someone to take me back to the champion's quarters. I did not expect the Empress. She walked in alone, no guards, no attendants. She was still in her white and gold, but the crown was gone and she looked smaller without it. She closed the door behind her and stood against it, as if she wanted to be able to leave quickly if she needed to. She looked at me for a long moment. I looked back. Finally she said, "How did you know the gas would affect the Krellian's mask if you removed his tube?" I said I'd not know for sure. I just knew his mask was a standard military design, which meant the seal depended on the tube being connected. If the seal broke, the gas would get in. It was a guess. She said, "A guess that worked." I said, "Most of my life has been guesses that worked. The ones that did not work are dead." She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "The Sharon, what did you do to him?" I said, "I showed him something he did not want to see." She nodded slowly. She said, "That was clever, cruel, but clever." I said, "He tried to get into my head first. I just gave him what he asked for." She walked a little further into the room and sat down in the single chair by the wall. She folded her hands in her lap. She looked tired in a way that I recognized because I had seen it in my own reflection 100 times. She said, "Why did you come here?" "Sergeant Hale," I said, "because I was ordered to." She said, "No, that is why you boarded the shuttle. That is not why you walked into that arena today." She was right. I thought about it. I said, "I suppose because I did not have anywhere else to be." She said, "That is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in 6 months." I asked her something I had been wanting to ask since the throne room. I asked, "Why did you warn me?" She was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought she was not going to answer. Then she said, "Because I have watched 7 of these trials in my life, as a child, as a princess, and now as Empress, and every time a young man or woman is paraded in front of me, knowing nothing about what they are walking into, most of them die not from the trials, from what comes after. The houses choose who wins. The houses choose who dies. The Ravan is not a competition, it is a theater. I thought you deserved to know that before you stepped onto the stage." I said, "So the trials are rigged?" She said, "Not all of them, not completely. The early trials are real because the houses enjoy the spectacle, but by the 5th or 6th trial the winner has already been chosen." "Always?" I said. "And this time who did the houses choose?" She looked at me. She said, "They did not choose anyone yet. They are waiting to see what you do. You are new, unexpected. 3 of the great houses think they can use you. 2 think you must be removed. The rest are waiting." I said, and you, what do you think? She did not answer that. Instead, she stood up. She walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the frame. Without turning around, she said, "Second trial is in 2 days. It is called the Hunt of Shadows. You will be placed in a forest you do not know at night with no weapons. You will be hunted by the nobles of House Renari. They have paid the trial masters for the right to test you personally. They do not expect you to survive. I want you to survive. Do you understand me, Sergeant Hale?" And then she was gone. I sat in that room for a long time after she left. The medic came back to check on me, so I was fine and left again. Food was brought. I ate without tasting it. My mind was working through what she had told me. The trials were partly rigged. The houses were watching me. Some wanted to use me. Some wanted me dead. And the Empress, the woman who was supposed to be the prize at the end of all this, had just broken every rule of the Revan to warn me about an assassination attempt disguised as a test, which meant one of two things. Either she was playing a game of her own that I did not understand, or she was desperate in a way I had not realized, or both. I was taken back to the champions' quarters that evening. 3 of the other rooms were empty now. Their occupants would not be coming back. The Krellian was in the medical bay, recovering but out of the competition. The sharing was gone as well, though no one would tell me where. The Triran nodded to me as I passed, a small gesture of respect I had not expected. The Kavaran just watched me with its single large eye and said nothing. The others treated me differently now, not as a friend, but not as a joke anymore either. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I studied everything I could find about the forests of the V'Halloran homeworld. I studied House Renari, the noble family that had paid for the right to hunt me. They were old money, old power, and they had a long history of killing people who embarrassed them. I did not sleep much. I ate everything they brought me. I stretched. I practiced moving silently on the polished floor of my room, finding the places where my boots made the least sound. I was not going to win by being stronger than them. I was going to win by being harder to find than they expected. On the morning of the second trial, a different guard came for me. She was younger than the others, and she did not meet my eyes when she spoke. She told me to follow her. I followed. She did not lead me to the usual arena gate. She led me down a side corridor, through a small door, and out into a cold morning courtyard where a small transport was waiting. Inside the transport, already seated, was the Empress herself. She was dressed in a traveling cloak of dark gray. She did not look at me as I climbed in and sat across from her. Door closed. The transport lifted off. We flew in silence for a while over black mountains and silver lakes. Finally she spoke. She said, "I am not supposed to be here." I said, "I gathered that." She said, "I have about 20 minutes before I need to be back in the palace." I said, "You are taking a risk." She said, "Yes." I said, "Why?" She pulled something out from under her cloak. It was a small flat disc, no larger than a coin. She pressed it into my hand. She said, "This is a V'Halloran tracking blocker. It will hide you from the hunter's equipment for exactly 1 hour. After that it will burn out and they will find you. Use the hour well." I looked down at the disc. I looked up at her. I said, "Why are you helping me?" She did not answer for a long Moment, then she said, because you are the first person in a long time who did not look at me like a prize to be won. You looked at me like a person, even when I was cruel to you in the throne room, even when I told you that you would die. You looked at me like I was a person first and an empress second. I had forgotten what that felt like. I did not know what to say. I closed my hand around the disc. I said, thank you, your majesty. She said, my name is Zyra. When we are alone, you may use it only when we are alone. I said, Zyra. It sounded strange on my tongue. And right at the same time, she almost smiled. Almost. It did not quite reach her face, but it was there in her eyes. The transport began to descend. We were coming down at the edge of a vast dark forest with trees taller than any building I had ever seen, their leaves black against a sky that was already starting to turn toward evening. The transport landed in a small clearing. Trial official was waiting. My time with the Empress was over. I stood up to leave. She did not stand. She just watched me go. As I reached the door, she said one more thing. She said, come back alive, Marcus. It was the first time anyone in the Valharan Imperium had used my first name. I stepped out of the transport and the cold forest air hit my face. The trial official handed me a small survival kit, explained the rules in a flat voice, and walked away. A horn sounded in the distance. The hunt had begun. Somewhere out there in those dark trees, the nobles of House Renari were coming for me, armed and trained and certain I would not see another sunrise. I slipped the tracking blocker into my pocket. I looked up at the sky where the first stars were starting to appear, and I started to run. I ran for the first 10 minutes without thinking. My boots were quiet on the thick carpet of black leaves, and the trees swallowed me up almost immediately. The forest was strange in ways I had not expected from the files. The trunks were wider than houses, and they curved upward into a canopy so thick I could barely see the sky. The air smelled like cold water and something like burnt sugar. Small creatures moved in the branches above me, their eyes flashing green when they caught the light. I stopped behind a fallen log to catch my breath and think. The tracking blocker in my pocket was already warm against my leg. 1 hour after that, the hunters would find me. I needed to use this hour to do something they would not expect. Running further into the forest would not save me. They knew this land. I did not. I needed to stop running away from them and start running toward them. I had made a decision in the transport while listening to the Empress tell me about House Renari, a decision I had not shared with her because I knew she would have told me not to do it. The nobles hunting me were not soldiers. They were rich men and women who treated killing sport. They would expect a terrified human to flee in a straight line and try to hide. They would not expect the prey to turn around and hunt them instead. That is what I was going to do. I pulled open the survival kit the trial official had given me. Inside was a small knife, a coil of thin wire, a fire striker, a water bag, and a packet of dry food. It was not much, but it was enough for a man who had spent 5 years in Terran's special forces before being moved to the Expeditionary Corps. I had been trained for exactly this kind of situation, not on a Valharan forest moon, true, but the principles of hunting a hunter are the same on any world. Move quietly, stay low, strike from behind, never stay in one place long enough to be found. I started by building 3 false trails. I ran in 3 different directions for a short distance, dragging my boots to leave obvious tracks, then circling back carefully to erase my real path. Any tracker worth the name would find all 3 trails within minutes, and each one would cost them time to investigate, time I could use. Then I climbed. The trees here had low, wide branches, easy to grip, and I went up about 30 ft and began moving through the canopy. The hunters would be looking for me on the ground. They would not think to look up, not at first. I heard them before I saw them. The nobles of House Renari did not move. Quietly, they came through the forest, a loose line of 6, talking to each other in low voices, carrying long, thin rifles and wearing dark armor with silver decorations. They were laughing. One of them made a joke about how long this would take. Another said she hoped I would run fast enough to make it interesting. They passed almost directly beneath me, and I held my breath until they were gone. Then I dropped down behind them and began to follow. This was the part that would have seemed mad to anyone watching. I was unarmed, except for a small knife. They had rifles. If even one of them turned around at the wrong moment, I would be finished, but they were not looking behind them. Why would they? They were the hunters. I was the prey. The prey does not chase. I picked my first target carefully. The noble at the back of the group was a tall Vihelaran woman with silver hair tied in a long braid. She was walking slightly apart from the others, probably because she thought she was above them. Her arrogance made her lazy. I waited until the group reached a small stream where the sound of running water would cover any noise, and I moved up behind her as she paused to adjust her boot. I did not kill her. I want to be clear about that. Killing nobles in a trial meant a death sentence, no matter how I justified it. What I did was put her to sleep. Terran hand-to-hand training includes a pressure point method that works on most humanoid species. I applied it from behind, quickly and cleanly, and she went limp in my arms. I lowered her to the ground beside the stream. I took her rifle, her communicator, and a small pouch of what looked like tracking darts from her belt. Then I dragged her behind a large tree and left her there, breathing steadily, with no memory of how she had gotten there. 5 hunters left. The group noticed she was gone. About 10 minutes later, I heard one of them call her name, Valerie, then again louder. Then a confused murmur as they gathered to look for her. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I had studied the rifles from the files, and I knew how the stun setting worked. The rifles were designed for hunting, and they had a non-lethal mode for when nobles wanted to capture prey alive to play with. I switched the rifle to stun and took careful aim from my position in the trees. I fired twice. 2 nobles dropped before the others understood what was happening. The remaining 3 panicked. They started firing into the trees around them, shouting orders that contradicted each other. I moved through the branches, silent as I could manage, and I fired a 3rd shot. Another noble dropped. 2 left, and they were now terrified. They ran. They actually ran back the way they had come, shouting for backup on their communicators. I let them go. I did not want to kill them, and I did not want to push my luck. I climbed down from the tree, gathered the 3 unconscious nobles, checked that they were breathing, and left them neatly arranged beside the stream. I took their rifles and their communicators. I kept one rifle and destroyed the others by removing their power cells and throwing them into the water. Then I disappeared back into the forest. The tracking blocker was down to 15 minutes. I needed to use every one of them. By the time the blocker burned out, I was 3 miles away in a small cave I had found at the base of a rocky hill. The cave was dry and narrow, and I had brushed away my tracks at the entrance. I sat against the back wall and ate some of the dry food from the survival kit. I drank a little water. I listened. For a long time I heard nothing. Then far away I heard the sound of a V'Helleran patrol ship passing overhead. It moved, slowly searching. It did not stop. It did not see me. I let myself smile just a little. The night passed slowly. I did not sleep, not really, but I rested in short pieces, one eye always on the cave entrance. The forest around me was alive with sounds I did not recognize, calls of birds, the rustle of large creatures moving through the undergrowth. Once, something very large passed by the cave entrance, close enough that I could see its silver eyes glowing in the dark. It did not come in. I did not move. It went away. In the early morning, just before dawn, I heard voices, many voices. A large force was moving through the forest. They were calling out in V'Helleran, and I understood enough to know they were calling for me, not to hunt me, to retrieve me. The trial had ended. Someone had called it early. I stepped out of the cave with my hands raised and the stolen rifle over my shoulder, barrel pointed down. V'Helleran officer spotted me almost immediately. She lowered her weapon. She saw I was not a threat. She walked over to me, looking tired and annoyed. And she said, "Sergeant Hale, you are to come with me immediately." There had been an incident with House Renari. 3 of their nobles had been found unconscious by a stream. The house was demanding my execution. The Empress had overruled them. I was being recalled. I asked what had happened to the 2 who escaped. The officer gave me a sharp look. She said, "They reported that you had killed 4 of their number and were hunting the rest. When the recovery team found everyone alive, House Renari lost considerable standing in the court. The Empress has declared the second trial complete. You are the winner. The other champions have also been recalled. They will compete again in the third trial with you." I did not show what I was feeling on my face, but inside I was quietly proud of myself, not just for surviving, for winning by not killing. It mattered. Way I could not fully explain. It meant I was still myself. It meant the soldier who had walked out of Kethar 9 had not been erased by what happened there. He was still here. He still had rules even when no one was watching. I was flown back to the palace in a small shuttle. When I arrived, I was taken directly to the Empress, not to the throne room, to a smaller private hall with tall windows that looked out over the city. She was standing alone, waiting for me. She turned when I entered. She did not speak at first. She just looked at me for a long moment, as if she were checking that I was really there, really alive. Finally she said, "You did not kill them?" I said, "No." She said, "Why not?" I said, "Because I did not need to. Killing would have given House Renari a reason to come after me with everything they had. Leaving them alive and embarrassed was worse for them." She was quiet. Then she said, "That is the thinking of a diplomat, not a soldier." I said, "I have been both." She almost smiled again. "Almost. She walked to the window. She said, "The houses are angry, all of them," I said. "What does that mean for me?" she said. "It means they do not know what to do. With you, you are not behaving the way they expected a human champion was supposed to be easy to predict. Either you would die quickly or you would win. And be easy to control. You are doing neither. You are winning in ways that make them look foolish." I said, "I am sorry if that causes you problems." She said, "Do not be sorry. It is the first time in 6 months I have watched the council argue and not been the one they were arguing about." We stood at the window together for a while, not talking. The city below was waking up. Silver towers caught the morning light. Strange birds wheeled in the air between them. She said, "The third trial is in 5 days. It is called the trial of wit. You will be given a puzzle. You will have 1 hour to solve it. In front of the full court, the puzzle is designed by the trial masters. It cannot be rigged. It is fair in that sense, but the other champions have tutors who have trained them for this. You do not." I said, "What kind of puzzle?" She said, "It changes every time. Strategy, logic. Sometimes a riddle, sometimes a test of observation, always difficult." She turned away from the window to face me. She said, "I cannot help you with this one. I would be caught. The trial masters watch closely." I said, "You have already helped me more than anyone in this palace. That is enough." She looked at me for a long moment, then she said something I did not expect. She said, "Marcus, tell me about the world you came from." We talked for over an hour. I told her about Earth, about the blue oceans and the green forests and the cities with lights that you could see from space. I told her about my mother, who had been a teacher before she died. I told her about my father, who had been a mechanic and who had taught me to fix anything with my hands if I was patient enough. I told her about the friends I had lost on Kethar 9, not the details, just their names, just who they had been before they were gone. She listened. She did not interrupt. When I was finished, she told me about her own life, about her 2 sisters who had been her best friends and who had been killed when she was 17 cycles old, about her mother who had been cold and distant and who had never once said she was proud of any of them, about the years she had spent learning to be an empress when all she wanted was to be left alone. It was the strangest conversation I had ever had, sitting in a hall of silver and glass on an alien world, talking to the most powerful woman in this part of the galaxy, as if we were 2 soldiers sharing stories after a long march. When she finally said I had to leave, I did not want to, but I understood. Her attendants would come looking for her. Soon we could not be found together. I stood to go. She said, "Marcus, wait." I turned. She said, "There is something you should know about the third trial. It is watched more closely than any other trial. Every noble house, every ally, every enemy, everyone in the Imperium will be watching whatever you do in that trial. It will decide how the rest of this riven plays out." I said, "I understand." She said, "No, you do not. This is the moment where the houses will decide if you are a tool they can use or a threat they must remove. Everything depends on which one they believe." I thought about it. I said, "So I need to be neither." She said, "Yes, but more than that, you need to be something they have not seen before, something that does not fit into their plans, something they cannot predict." I said, "I will try." She said, "Do not try, do it." And then she turned back to the window, and I knew the Conversation was over. I went back to my room. The palace was quiet. Most of the nobles were still in shock from what had happened with House Renari. I lay on the hard bed and I stared at the ceiling and I thought about what she had said, something they had not seen before, something they could not predict. I had ideas, but they would take time. For the next 5 days I prepared, not for a specific puzzle because I could not know what the puzzle would be, but I prepared myself. I read every book the V. Haloran Palace Library would let me access. I studied the great puzzles and riddles of their history. I learned the patterns their trial masters preferred. I watched recordings of past trials of wit where I could. I ate. I slept when I could. I did not see the Empress again. She was busy with the houses trying to keep the political situation from falling apart while the trials continued. On the morning of the third trial, I woke up before dawn. I sat on the edge of my bed. I thought about my mother, about my father, about the squad I had lost, about Zyra who had warned me and helped me and shared her life with me, even though doing any of those things could destroy her. I thought about what kind of man I wanted to be when I walked into that trial chamber. I decided I was not going to win the puzzle just to win. I was going to win it in a way that would make the houses afraid, because fear was the only thing they respected, and fear used correctly could buy me and Zyra the one thing we needed most: time. I put on my gray suit. I walked down the hall. The other champions were already assembled, 3 of them now plus me. 4 total had made it through the first 2 trials, the Tryon, the Caven, a Melari insect woman I had not paid much attention to before, and me. We walked together toward the trial chamber, and for the first time none of them looked at me like I did not belong. I did not know what puzzle I was about to face. I did not know who would win, but I knew I was ready. And I knew that whatever happened in the next hour, it was going to change everything. The doors to the chamber opened. The court was waiting inside. Every noble house, every ally, every enemy, and high above them all on her throne was Zyra. She looked at me as I walked in, and for just a second her eyes met mine. She did not smile, she did not nod, but something passed between us that did not need words. Come back alive, Marcus. I was going to do more than that. I was going to come back winning. The third trial chamber was a circular room with a high domed ceiling, and in the very center was a raised platform made of what looked like black glass. On that platform sat 4 podiums, 1 for each remaining champion, and in front of each podium was a small silver box. The audience was arranged in rings around the platform so that every noble in the court could see clearly. Zyra sat on a raised seat at the far end of the chamber, flanked by 2 of the oldest trial masters, both of them elderly V. Haloran women with faces like carved stone. We were led to our podiums. I was placed between the Tryon and the Melari. The Caven was across from me. A trial master stepped forward and explained the rules in a voice that carried through the chamber without any need for amplification. Each of us would open our silver box at the signal. Inside would be a puzzle. We would have 1 hour to solve it. The solution must be presented aloud to the court. Failure to solve meant elimination. Success meant advancement to the 4th trial. If more than 1 champion solved correctly, the first to do so would be declared the winner of this trial, and would have the advantage in the next. A second trial master added that communication between champions was forbidden, so was the use of any equipment not provided in the silver box. Any violation would mean immediate elimination. The signal was a bell. I opened my box. Inside was a small stack of papers, single writing stylus, and a strange object that looked like a twisted metal knot with no clear beginning or end. I picked up the papers first. The top page had a short message written in Halloran, translated below into Terran Standard. It said in the old tongue of our people, there is a story of a queen who faced 3 advisors. One advisor always told the truth. One advisor always lied. One advisor sometimes told the truth and sometimes lied. And which one could not be predicted. The queen needed to choose a path through a dangerous forest, and only one advisor knew the safe way. She could ask only one question to only one advisor, and she did not know which advisor was which. What question should she ask, and to whom? I read the message twice, then I looked at the metal knot. I turned it in my hands. I could not find where it began or where it ended. There were no seams, no openings, no clear way to take it apart. And then I understood. The puzzle was not the question in the message. The puzzle was the metal knot. The message was a trick, a classic logic riddle that every educated person in the galaxy already knew the answer to. If I spent my hour working on the riddle, I would solve it in 10 minutes and feel clever, and then I would sit at my podium for 50 minutes with nothing to do, and the metal knot would stay knotted, and when the hour ended, the trial masters would reveal that the real test was the knot, and I would fail. They were testing whether we would see past the obvious puzzle to find the hidden one. It was a beautiful trap, and I almost fell into it. I set the papers aside. I picked up the knot. I began to study it properly. Around me, I could hear the other champions working. The Trian was making small rustling sounds, probably writing on the papers. The Caven was silent, but I could see out of the corner of my eye that it had opened the message and was frowning at it. The Melari was clicking softly to itself, in the way her kind did when they were thinking. I focused on the knot. I ran my fingers over every part of it. The metal was cool and smooth, but there were very tiny ridges at certain points that I could feel but not quite see. I tilted the knot toward the light. The ridges formed a pattern that looked almost like letters, Halloran letters. I remembered seeing them in the palace library. The knot was not a puzzle to be untied. It was a puzzle to be read. I spent the next 20 minutes tracing the ridges with my fingertip, reading them slowly. The letters formed a single sentence. Old Halloran. It took me a long time to translate it in my head because my Halloran was still rough, but I got there. The sentence said, "The truth is in the breaking." I stared at that sentence for another 5 minutes. What did it mean? The truth is in the breaking. Breaking what? The knot. I looked at the knot again. If I broke it, I would damage trial equipment. That might disqualify me, but the sentence on the knot itself was telling me to break it, which meant the trial masters expected it to be broken, unless that was another trap. I thought about what I knew. The trial was called the trial of wit. It was designed to test thinking, creativity, and courage. The easy puzzle was the riddle. The hidden puzzle was the knot. and the knot itself was telling me to break at 3 layers. Most champions would stop at 1, some would stop at 2, very few would go to 3. But I was not most champions, and I had spent my whole life breaking things when they needed to be broken. I gripped the knot firmly in both hands. I looked up at Zyra. She was watching me. Her face gave nothing away. I took a breath and I snapped the knot in half. The metal made a soft clicking sound as it broke, and inside was a small hollow chamber, and inside that chamber was a tiny folded piece of paper. I pulled it out carefully. I unfolded it. On the paper was a single word written in V. Hey Lauren, surrender. I almost laughed out loud. The trial masters had hidden one final test inside the knot. After all the layers of clever thinking, after all the work to break past the obvious puzzle and find the hidden one, the final answer they wanted the champion to shout out to the court was the word surrender, to prove that the wisest thing a ruler could do sometimes was to admit when a fight could not be won and give up gracefully. It was a very Vhaloran answer. It fit everything I had read about their culture. Their great generals were famous for knowing when to retreat. Their greatest empress in history had been the one who had ended a war by surrendering a fight she could have won, because winning would have destroyed too much. The trial masters wanted me to stand up and say the word surrender, and the whole court would understand that I had found the deepest meaning of the puzzle. And I was not going to do it, because Zyra had told me I needed to be something the houses had not seen before, something they could not predict, something that did not fit their plans. And every champion in Vhaloran history who had won the trial of wit by giving the expected answer had fit the plans perfectly. That was why those champions had all been controlled by the houses afterward. The houses had planned for them, predicted them. I was going to give a different answer. I raised my hand, signaling that I was ready. The chamber went very quiet. The other 3 champions were still working. The Kavaran looked over at me with something like disbelief. The Tryon had not even noticed I had moved. The Malari clicked once softly and went back to its work. A trial master stepped forward. She asked me, "Do you have your answer?" I said, "I do." She said, "Present it to the court." I stepped away from my podium. I walked to the edge of the platform where I could see every face in the chamber. I held up the broken pieces of the metal knot in one hand and the small folded paper with the word surrender in the other. I spoke in a clear voice. I said, "The puzzle has 3 layers. The first is the riddle on the papers, which asks a question about advisors and truth. The answer to that riddle is well known. You ask either remaining advisor which path the third advisor would recommend, and you take the opposite path. The second layer is the knot itself, which has a message hidden in the ridges saying the truth is in the breaking. The third layer is what I found inside the knot when I broke it. Paper with a single word, surrender." A low murmur went through the court. The trial masters were watching me very carefully. I continued. I said, "The expected answer, the answer the trial was designed to produce, is for me to say the word surrender and give the court a lesson in wisdom, but I am not going to give that answer, because there is a 4th layer to this puzzle that no one has seen yet." The chamber went completely silent. Zyra leaned forward on her throne. The trial masters looked at each other. I said the true answer to a puzzle that asks you to surrender is not to surrender, it is to ask why the puzzle is asking you to surrender in the first place. A wise ruler does not simply do what she is told, even by ancient tradition. A wise ruler asks who benefits from her surrender, and in this case, if the answer to the trial of wit is surrender, then the champion who becomes the Empress's partner is the one who has proven most willing to give up. That is not a partner, that is a puppet. This puzzle does not test wisdom, it tests obedience dressed up as wisdom. And I refuse to answer it on those terms. The silence in the chamber was so deep, I could hear my own heartbeat. I said, my answer is this: the question should not be, do I surrender? The question should be, to whom am I surrendering and why? I surrender to no house, I surrender to no council. If I give my loyalty, I give it by choice to a person for a reason. That is my answer. That is my solution to the puzzle. I walked back to my podium. I set the broken knot and the paper down on top of it. I stood quietly with my hands folded in front of me, and I waited. For a long moment, nothing happened. The trial masters were whispering to each other. The other champions had all stopped working. The court was completely still. Zaira was watching me with an expression I could not read, and the two old women beside her looked as if they had just swallowed something bitter. Finally, one of the trial masters stepped forward. She was the oldest of the three. Her silver hair was almost white with age. She walked slowly up to the platform. She stopped in front of me. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, in a voice that was surprisingly clear and strong, "Sergeant Hale, you have given an answer that is not in our books. You have given an answer that no champion has given before. In the 1,100 years of the Riven, the trial masters must confer. The court will wait." The three old women gathered together at the side of the chamber. They spoke in low voices, their heads closed together. The rest of the court waited. I did not look at Zaira. I was afraid if I did, I would see fear in her face, and I needed to stay focused. The other champions stared at me. The Tryon looked confused. The Kaveran looked angry. The Malari looked, for the first time, interested. After what felt like a very long time, the trial masters came back. The oldest one stood at the center of the chamber. She raised her voice so the whole court could hear. She said, "The trial of wit has a purpose. That purpose is to test the mind of the champion. The champion, Sergeant Marcus Hale, has shown that his mind is not only capable of solving the puzzle in front of him, but of questioning the puzzle itself. This is a kind of wisdom that is rare, and in the old writings of our people was considered the highest form of intelligence. The trial masters declare that Sergeant Hale has passed the trial of wit. He is the first champion to do so. The other champions will complete their answers for the record, but Sergeant Hale is the winner of this trial." The court exploded into sound. Some nobles cheered, many did not. Some were shouting in anger, some were clapping. House Vernari in their blue robes were standing and shouting about an insult to tradition. Other houses were shouting them down. It was chaos. I stood at my podium and kept my face calm, but inside I was shaking. I had done it. I had given an answer that did not fit any plan. The houses had no idea what to do with me now. Some of them were realizing right now in this chamber that I might be dangerous To them, others were realizing that I might be useful in ways they had not considered, and all of them were going to have to change their plans. Zyra stood up, the chamber quieted. She raised one hand. She said, "The court will come to order. The trial of wit is complete. The champions will return to their quarters. The fourth trial will be held in 7 days." That is all. She turned and left the chamber, followed by her personal guards. The trial masters bowed and followed. The nobles began to file out, still arguing among themselves. I was led back to my quarters with the other champions. None of us spoke. The Tryon kept glancing at me sideways. The Caveran would not look at me at all. The Mallory walked beside me for a while, and then she said, softly and accented, "Standard, that was foolish or brilliant. I do not know which yet." I said, "Neither do I." She clicked softly and said, "We will see," and then she turned into her own room and was gone. I sat on the edge of my bed. I felt tired, more tired than I had felt in days. Winning a trial was one thing. Changing the rules of the trial while the whole court watched was another. I did not know what was going to happen next. I did not know if I had just saved myself or if I had just painted a target on my back that every house in the Imperium would be aiming at for the rest of my life. I did not have to wait long to find out. That evening, just as the sun was setting outside my window, there was a knock at my door, not the chime that guards used, a soft knock, human style. I stood up and opened the door. Zyra was there, alone again. She was dressed in the gray traveling cloak she had worn in the transport which I had come to understand meant she was moving through the palace in secret. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. She closed the door behind her, and then, before I could say anything, she said, "That was the most frightening thing I have ever seen anyone do." I said, "I am sorry if I frightened you." She said, "No, you misunderstand. I'm not frightened of you. I am frightened for you. Do you understand what you just did in that chamber?" I said, "I think I do. I refuse to be controlled." She said, "You did more than that. You taught every noble in the Imperium that a human champion cannot be predicted. That is not something they will forgive. Some of them will try to use you anyway, thinking they can be the first to succeed where others have failed. Some of them will decide you are too dangerous to be allowed to continue. And some of them tonight are going to start planning to kill you before the fourth trial begins." I said, "How do I survive that?" She said, "That is what I came to tell you. Starting tomorrow, I am assigning you a personal guard, a woman I trust. Her name is Kaelin. She has served my family for 20 cycles. She will stay with you at all times outside of the trials. She will watch your food. She will watch your door. She will watch the windows. She will not let you out of her sight." I said, "A personal guard for a trial champion, that is not allowed, is it?" She said, "It is not forbidden. It has never been done before because no champion has ever needed it. I am creating a precedent. The houses will be angry. I do not care. I am the Empress. They will have to accept it." I said, "Zyra, why are you doing this?" "Really?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I told you before, you see me as a person. That is rare. That is almost impossible. I have been Empress for 7 cycles, and in that time, I can count on one hand the number of people who have looked at me and seen anything other than a crown." She paused. She said, "I have decided that if I am Going to die young like my mother and my sisters. I would rather die after a few weeks of being seen as a person than after another 20 years of being seen as a crown. I said, you are not going to die young. Not while I am here. She looked at me. She said, I believe you mean that. I said, I do. She stepped closer. Not much, just one step, but in the small room it was enough to close the distance between us. She said, the fourth trial is the trial of sacrifice. It will be the most dangerous yet, not because of the trial itself, because of what will happen around it. There are houses that will try to kill you during that trial, not just to win, to remove you permanently. I said, I know. She said, I will do what I can to protect you. But there is a limit to what I can do without revealing that I care, and if I reveal that, the houses will use it against both of us. I said, I understand. She said, do you? I said, yes. The moment you step into, obviously, they will know you are attached to me. That attachment becomes a weakness they can use, so you have to stay cold in public. You have to let them think I am just another champion too. You? She said, yes, that is exactly right. I said, so what do we do? She said, we trust each other. In private we are honest, in public we are strangers. That is the only way. I said, I can do that. She said, good. Then she turned to leave. At the door she paused. Without looking back, she said, Marcus, if something happens to you in the fourth trial, I want you to know I do not regret warning you that first night. I do not regret telling you my name, and I do not regret coming here tonight. I said, Zyra, something is not going to happen to me. She said, promise me. I said, I promise. She left. The door closed behind her. I stood in the middle of my room for a long time, and I thought about what I had just promised. I was a soldier. Soldiers do not make promises about staying alive. We make promises about doing our duty, but this promise was different. This one I was going to keep, no matter what, because I had seen what was in her eyes when she asked me. I had seen fear, yes, but I had also seen hope, and hope is a dangerous thing to break in someone who has not felt it for a very long time. The next morning, a Haloran woman in light armor was standing outside my door. She was shorter than most Halorans, but her shoulders were wide, and her hands had scars across the knuckles. She introduced herself as Kaelin. She said very little. She said she was my shadow for as long as the Empress required it. She checked my room for hidden devices. She checked my food. She did not smile. She did not frown. She was simply present and alert and ready. The days until the fourth trial passed. Slowly, I trained when I could. I rested when I needed to. I did not see Zyra again during those days. That was part of the plan. In public we were strangers, but I knew she was thinking about me, and she knew I was thinking about her. On the sixth day, Kaelin woke me in the middle of the night. She said, someone has tried to enter the hall. 3 assassins. They have been handled. I sat up. I said, handled? She said, they will not be a problem again. Do not ask more. Sleep now. Tomorrow you must be ready. I lay back down. I did not sleep much, but I understood. The houses were already moving. The attempt on my life had started, and the fourth trial had not even begun yet. On the morning of the trial of sacrifice, Kaelin walked me down the long hall toward the trial chamber. Before we reached the doors, she stopped. Me, she said, Sergeant Hale. The Empress asked me to tell you something if this day ever came. I said, what? She said to remember that you promised. I said, tell her I remember. Kaelin nodded, the doors opened. I walked inside into whatever was waiting for me, and I knew that everything that had happened so far had only been the beginning. The real trial, the real fight was about to start, and this time, it was not just my life that depended on me winning, it was hers too. The trial of sacrifice was held outdoors in a wide-open valley about 2 hours by shuttle from the palace. The valley was ringed by low hills, and the floor of the valley was a flat plain of pale yellow grass that moved in waves when the wind blew through it. A temporary platform had been built on one of the hills so the court could watch from a safe distance. Kaelin traveled with me in the shuttle and did not speak the whole way. Her eyes were on the ground in the sky at all times, and her hand never strayed far from the weapon at her belt. When we landed, a trial master met us at the edge of the valley. She explained the rules. Each champion would be paired with a Haloran citizen. The citizen was a stranger, someone the champion had never met, and the champion would be given 30 minutes to protect that citizen across a 3-mile walk through the valley. Along the way there would be tests, dangerous challenges. Any champion who abandoned their citizen to save themselves would fail. Any citizen who was harmed would cause their champion to lose points. To pass the trial, the champion had to reach the far end of the valley with the citizen still alive and well. It sounded simple. It was not. I already knew from Zyra that the houses had been planning for this trial. I knew that my citizen had been chosen carefully, and when I was introduced to her, I understood immediately why. Her name was Lyra. She was a young woman, maybe 20 cycles old in Haloran terms, which translated to something close to human teenager. She was slender, with silver hair that she had braided into a long rope, and her eyes were wide and frightened. She was not a fighter. She was not trained for this. She was a student, she told me in a small shaking voice, from the University of Old Karath, and she had volunteered because her family needed the payment the palace was offering. She did not want to die today. I looked at her and I understood. The houses were not just trying to kill me. They were going to make me watch this young woman die first. They were counting on me to break when it happened. They wanted a human who would lose his mind when a child he was sworn to protect was taken from him. They wanted footage of me failing, proof that humans were too emotional, too attached, too weak to be trusted with real responsibility. I had a different plan. I knelt down so I was at her eye level. I put my hand on her shoulder. I said, Lyra, listen to me. My name is Marcus. I am going to get you through this valley. I need you to do exactly what I say when I say it. Can you do that? She nodded, too scared to speak. I said, good, stay close to me. Do not run unless I tell you to. Do not hide unless I tell you to. If I fall down, you keep moving forward toward the far end of the valley. Do you understand? She nodded. Again, I stood up. A trial master signaled the start. Lyra and I began walking into the valley together. Behind us, Kaelin stood at the edge of the starting line with her arms folded. She could not come with me. The rules said champion and citizen only, but I knew she was watching. I knew she would act if she saw anything she could act on. The first mile was quiet, too quiet. The tall yellow grass swayed around us. Sky was pale and cloudless. I kept Lyra just behind my right shoulder where I could see her without turning my head. And I watched the grass for movement. Every 20 steps I stopped and listened. Lyra did not complain, she just stayed close and walked when I walked in. Stopped when I stopped. The first attack came at the 1 mile mark. It was not an animal, it was not a hunter, it was a drone. A small silver drone rose up out of the grass about 30 ft in front of us, and its single red eye locked onto me. I pushed Lyra down behind a low rock and crouched next to her. The drone fired. Something hit the rock above our heads with a loud crack. Stun bolt, not a killing shot, which meant someone wanted to take us alive. That was worse in some ways. It meant the real danger was whoever was controlling the drone. I had studied Vhaloran drones during my preparation. I knew their weakness. They had to recharge between shots, and during the recharge their single red eye dimmed for about 2 seconds. I watched. The drone fired again. The bolt hit the rock. I saw the eye dim. I was up and running before the eye brightened again. I covered the 30 ft in less than 3 seconds. The drone was too slow to track me at close range. I grabbed it out of the air with both hands, ripped it to the ground, and smashed its eye with the heel of my boot. It sparked once and went dead. I dragged it back to Lyra and pulled out its internal data unit. The data unit showed where the drone had been receiving its commands from. Somewhere ahead of us, about half a mile, at a small outcropping of rocks. I told Lyra to stay low and follow me. We moved through the grass on our hands and knees. The yellow grass was tall enough to hide us if we stayed down. Lyra kept up. She did not make a sound. I began to feel something like respect. For her, she was more than she seemed. We reached the outcropping. I left Lyra hidden in the grass 20 ft away, and I crawled up to the rocks alone. Behind them were 2 Vhalorans in dark gray cloaks, not trial officials, with a portable drone control unit. They were watching a small screen and arguing in low voices. I understood them. One was saying they had lost contact with the drone. The other was saying I had clearly destroyed it, which was impossible because humans could not move that fast. The first was saying they needed to call in backup. I did not let them call in backup. I came over the rocks. I did not try to fight them. I did not need to. I kicked their control unit into the grass, pulled their communicators from their belts before they could react, and stepped back with both of their own weapons raised at them. They froze. I said in the best Vhaloran I could manage, "You will sit down. You will be quiet. If either of you moves, I will stun you." They sat down. They were nobles, I could tell from their rings, and they were terrified of being seen sitting on the ground at the hands of a human. It was almost funny. I bound their wrists with strips of cloth I tore from their own cloaks. I took their gear. I took a small healing device from one of their belts, which I recognized from the files as a standard Vhaloran combat medic kit. I went back to Lyra and helped her up. I told her we were moving faster now. She nodded. We moved. The second attack came at the 2-mile mark. This one was worse. It was not a drone. It was a predator, a large wild animal that the Vhalorans called a sauron, something like a cross between a wolf and a large cat with thick gray fur and long teeth. It came at us from the left fast out of a stand of dark trees. Lyra screamed. I had just enough time to push her behind me and raise one of the stolen stun weapons. The Sauron hit me before I could fire. Cleanly, I got off one shot that grazed its shoulder but did not bring it down. The animal knocked me to the ground, and for a terrible second I was looking up into its open mouth, but I had been in close fights before. I had fought things with teeth and claws and bad intentions. Many times I got my forearm up under its jaw, pushing its head back, and I fired the stun weapon into its chest at point-blank range. The Sauron twitched and went limp. I shoved it off me and stood up. My arm was bleeding where one of its claws had torn through my sleeve. I ignored the pain. I checked Lyra. She was crying quietly, but she was not hurt. I put my good hand on her shoulder. I said, "You are okay," she said. "I thought we were going to die." I said, "Not today, not yet." But I was not sure the Sauron was a natural predator. Its presence here at exactly the right moment was too convenient. Something had driven it to us. I pulled the healing device from my pocket. I used it on my arm first, because I could not protect Lyra with a bleeding arm, and then I used it on a small scratch she had picked up on her ankle. The device worked in seconds. The wounds closed. The pain faded. We kept moving. Half a mile to go. The third attack came without warning, and it was the one that almost finished me. We were crossing a shallow stream when the ground under Lyra's feet gave way. I had not seen the trap. It had been hidden under a layer of grass laid carefully over a pit, and she stepped on exactly the wrong spot. She fell through. With a short cry, I snorts through myself forward and caught her wrist just as she went down. I landed on my stomach at the edge of the pit, my arms stretched down into the dark hole with her dangling below me. The pit was deep, maybe 20 ft. At the bottom I could see sharp metal stakes pointing up. If I let go, she would not survive. Lyra was crying again. Her free hand was scrabbling against the dirt wall of the pit, trying to find something to hold. I said, "Lyra, look at me. Look at my face." She looked up. I said, "I am not going to let go. Do you understand me?" "I am not going to let go." She nodded. I began to pull her up hand over hand. Slowly, carefully. She was not heavy, but the angle was bad, and the edge of the pit was crumbling. Then I heard them coming. 3 figures moved through the grass. Behind me, I could hear their boots. I did not have to look to know they were nobles. I could hear the soft sound of expensive armor. They had been waiting for this moment. They were here to finish what the drone and the Sauron had not. They were going to arrive at the pit just as I was struggling to pull Lyra up, and they were going to force me to choose: save the girl and be killed, or let her fall and save myself. They thought that was the choice I had. It was not. I dragged Lyra up the last few feet in one hard pull and rolled her onto the grass behind me. I stayed on my stomach at the edge of the pit. I did not turn around. I said to her very quietly, "Lyra, go, run, do not look back." She started to protest. I said, "Go." She ran. I listened to her footsteps fade into the grass. I waited. The 3 figures came out of the grass. Behind me, I heard one of them laugh softly. I heard another say, well, the human is down. This will be easier than we thought." I rolled over and fired before they understood what was happening. I had not been struggling to pull Lyra up. I had been waiting for them To come close enough, waiting for them. To believe I was tired and beaten. I had one stun weapon in my good hand and the other tucked under my chest. I brought both of them up, and I fired in a sweep. The first noble went down before she could raise her weapon. The second got off a wild shot that missed me by several feet. The third turned to run. I did not let him. I rolled forward, came up on one knee, and fired twice. More, both of them fell. Silence. I stood up. My chest was heaving. My arm was throbbing where the Soren had clawed me earlier, even after the healing device. I checked all three figures. They were unconscious but alive. I took their weapons, smashed their communicators, and left them where they had fallen. Then I ran after Lyra. I caught up with her near the end of the valley. She was sitting in the grass, shaking, her knees pulled up to her chest. She looked up when I approached, and when she saw me, she burst into tears of relief. I knelt next to her. I said, "We are almost there. You have to walk the last bit with me, okay?" She nodded. I helped her up. We walked the final 100 yards together. The trial officials were waiting at the finish line. So were the medics. So was Kaelin, standing at the front of the crowd, her eyes meeting mine as we crossed the line. She did not smile, but something in her face relaxed. I knew she had been worried. A trial master stepped forward. She said, "Sergeant Hale, you have completed the trial of sacrifice. Your citizen is alive and unharmed. You pass." Then in a lower voice she said, "There are reports of 3 unconscious nobles on the valley floor, armed and out of their homes without permission. Did you encounter them?" I said, "I encountered 3 individuals who attacked us. They are alive. They are bound and disarmed. They are where I left them." The trial master nodded slowly. She said, "That will be noted." Then she turned away. Lyra was taken to the medics. Before they led her away, she turned back to me. She said, "Thank you, Marcus." I said, "Take care of yourself, Lyra. Go home to your family." She nodded, and then she was gone. I was taken back to the shuttle with Kaelin. She sat across from me. She said, 3 noble houses all on the same day. This is worse than she expected. I said, "What will she do?" Kaelin said, "She will act. She does not have a choice anymore. They have shown their hand too openly." She said this in a quiet voice, and her eyes were cold. We flew back to the palace in silence. When we landed, I expected to be taken to my quarters. Instead, Kaelin led me to a different part of the palace, a part I had not seen before, a quiet wing with soft lighting and no guards at the doors. She stopped in front of a single black door. She said, "Go in." "Wait here." She stepped aside. I opened the door. Inside was a small private chamber with a fireplace, a low couch, and tall windows looking out over a dark garden. Zyra was standing at the windows, her back to me. She was not in imperial robes. She was in a simple dark dress, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. She turned when she heard the door close. She walked to me. She did not stop. She came right up to me, and before I could say anything, she put her arms around me and rested her head against my shoulder. I froze. Then I wrapped my arms around her carefully, as if she were made of something that could break. She said into my shoulder. I watched the whole thing, every second, from the drone to the siren to the pit. I thought I was going to have to watch you die. I said, "You did not." "I am here." She said, "You almost were not here." She pulled back and looked up at me. Her Eyes were wet, she said, the moment you went flat at the edge of the pit. I knew you had a plan, but I did not know if it would work. For 30 seconds I did not breathe. I am still not sure I am breathing now. I said, Zyra, breathe. She half laughed, half sobbed, and put her forehead against my chest. We stood like that for a long time. When she finally stepped back, she walked to the couch and sat down. She patted the cushion next to her. I sat. She poured 2 glasses of something pale blue from a decanter on the low table, and she handed one to me. She said, drink this. You have earned it. I drank. It was sweet and cold, and it went straight to my head, which was probably the point. She said, 3 houses tried to kill you today publicly, stupidly. I had been waiting for them to move, but I did not think they would be this bold. They thought they had you. They thought a human would break when a child was in danger. They bet everything on that, and now they have lost everything. I said, what happens now? She said, now I act. The 3 houses involved will be stripped of their titles. Their assets will be taken by the crown. Their leaders will be removed from the council. It will be the largest political action in my reign. It will make enemies of many. It will also make it clear to every other house that moving against you is the same as moving against me. I said, is that wise? She looked at me. She said, it is necessary. It is long overdue. My mother let the houses get too strong because she was afraid of them. My grandmother did the same. For 3 generations, the crown has been weaker than the great houses. It is time that changed. You have given me the reason I have been waiting for, Marcus. You have given me the excuse to finally do what should have been done decades ago. I said, I did not come here to reshape your empire. She said, I know that is why you were the right person to do it. The ones who come here wanting to change things are the ones who break things. You did not want anything. You only wanted to survive, and in surviving you showed everyone, including me, that the old way is not working. We sat together for a long time. We talked about small things, about our childhoods, about the kinds of food we liked, about the books we had read. It was strange in the middle of so much danger to have such an ordinary conversation, but it was the most human thing I had done in months. Eventually, she said, the 5th trial is in 10 days. I have pushed it back. The Imperium is in too much upheaval for it to happen sooner, which gives us time. I said, time for what? She said, time to plan. The 5th trial is the trial of devotion. It is the second to last, and it is the one I am most afraid of, because in the trial of devotion, the champion must prove their loyalty to the Empress, not by serving her, by letting go of her. Every champion in history has been asked to give up something they love in order to prove they love the Empress more. I said, what are you afraid they will ask me to give up? She was quiet. Then she said, you. I said, I do not understand. She said, they will ask you to give up yourself. They will ask you to renounce your humanity, not in words, in something more permanent, in a ritual. They will ask you to take a drug that changes your mind, that makes you more Vhaloran, that makes you forget your old loyalties. It is called the right of becoming. It has been done to every non-Vhaloran champion who reached the 5th trial for 800 years. It is considered an honor. But what it really does is erase who you were before. I said, they're going to try to make Me forget Earth, she said. Yes, they are going to try to make you. Forget me too, the old me, the honest. Me, the woman who came to your room at night and told you her real name. If you take the right, you will still be Marcus Hale, but you will be a Marcus Hale who has been told his whole life that V. Halorans are superior and who believes it now. You will love me the way subject loves a queen, not the way person loves another person. I said, then I will not take it. She said, if you refuse, you fail the trial, you are eliminated. And eliminated champions at the trial of devotion do not go home, they stay as servants forever. They are not allowed to leave because the rite has already been begun and they are considered half V. Haloran now. The Imperium will not release them. I said, so I take the drug and lose myself, or I refuse and lose my freedom. She said, those are the traditional outcomes. Yes. I said, then we need a third option. She looked at me. She said, that is exactly what I have been thinking for the past 10 days, and I have an idea. But you will not like it. I said, tell me. She took a deep breath. She said, Marcus, what if at the trial of devotion you did something no champion has done before? What if you refuse to compete? What if, instead of taking the drug or refusing the drug, you invoked an ancient law that has not been used in 1,100 years, a law that would change everything, a law that would take you off the board as a potential consort entirely and turn you into something else? I said, what law? She said, the oath of the bound blade. In the oldest records of our people, before the Revan existed in its current form, there was a different kind of role for a warrior who proved themselves to the Empress, not a partner, not a consort, a protector, champion who swore their life to the Empress's safety and nothing else. Bound blade could not rule, could not inherit, could not hold political power, but they also could not be touched by the houses. They were sacred, and they stood between the Empress and her enemies forever. I said, and this is an option. She said, it is an old option. It has been forgotten by most, but it still exists. In our law, no one has sworn it for more than 1,000 years. If you swear it, Marcus, you will not be my husband. You will not be a prince. You will be my shield, that is all. I was quiet for a long time. Then I said, Zyra, is that what you want? She looked at me carefully. She said, it is not what I have wanted for myself, but it is what I want for you. You should not have to change who you are to be with me. You should not have to take a drug or swear an oath that makes you less than you are. If you become my bound blade, you stay yourself, you stay Marcus, you stay human, and you stay at my side. I said, and what about us, the private? Us, the honest us? She said, that part does not have to change. The oath does not forbid it. It only forbids you from having political power, which honestly was going to get you killed anyway. This way you keep your life, you keep yourself, and you keep me, just not as a prince, as something older, something rarer, something I have wanted for a long time without knowing that was what I wanted. I said, a protector, just a protector. She said, there is no just about it. Bound blade is the most trusted person in the Empress's life. They share her counsel, they share her home. They do not share her crown because they do not want the crown. That is the point. That is why the houses cannot touch them. I said, I need to think about this. She said, of course, you have 10 days. I stood up to leave. She stood up with Me, at the door I stopped, I said, "Zyra, just so you know, I have been thinking about it for about 30 seconds. And I already know what my answer is." She looked at me, her eyes were bright. She said, "Do not tell me now, wait, I want you to be sure, when you walk into that trial chamber on the 10th day, if you swear the oath, I will know then. And if you do not, I will understand. Whatever you choose." I said, "All right, but I already know." I left the room. Kaylin fell in beside me. We walked back to my quarters in silence, but inside I was not silent at all. My mind was moving fast and my heart was moving faster. I had come to this world expecting to die. I had ended up changing the course of an empire, exposing a conspiracy, and falling in love with its empress. 10 days, 10 days until the 5th trial. 10 days until I walked into the chamber and did something no human had ever done, swearing an oath that had been dead for 1,100 years to a woman who had started as a stranger and become the person I most wanted to protect in this universe or any other. I was ready. The 10 days passed in a way that felt both too slow and too fast. The palace was tense. News of the punishment of the 3 houses had spread, and Zyra had been true to her word. She had stripped them of their titles in a single session of the council with the full court watching. 2 of the house leaders had tried to argue. 1 had tried to walk out. None of them had succeeded. Zyra had been colder and sharper in that session than I had ever seen her, and I heard from Kaylin afterward that many of the older nobles had said privately that she was more like her grandmother than anyone had realized. Her grandmother had been the last Vhaloran empress to rule without fear of the houses. It had been a long time since anyone had said that name with anything other than regret. I did not see Zyra in person during those 10 days. We had agreed to keep distance because the trials were entering their final stage and the spotlight was on us both. But she found small ways to remind me she was thinking of me. A book about Vhaloran law left in my room with a note pointing to the page about bound blades. A plate of what turned out to be her favorite childhood food sent to my quarters one evening. A single silver flower tied with gray thread placed on my pillow the night before the trial. No message, none was needed. Kaylin told me on the 9th evening that the other remaining champions had been given their preparations for the rite of becoming the drug that Zyra had warned me about. They had each gone into private chambers with their tutors to begin the mental preparation. They had not come out in 2 days. She said that if I wanted to participate in that preparation, there was still time. I said I would not be participating. She said I thought not, but I was required to offer. Nothing in her voice sounded disappointed. The morning of the trial of devotion was cold. I woke before dawn. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time just thinking. Then I dressed, not in the gray trial suit this time, in the full ceremonial uniform of the Terran Expeditionary Force, which had been delivered to my room the night before at Zyra's orders. Dark green jacket, black trousers, silver rank insignia, the service knife my father had given me, worn in a plain sheath at my belt. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like a soldier. That was good. That was exactly right. Kaylin was waiting outside my door. She looked me up and down. She said, "That is not a trial uniform." I said, "I know," she said, "the trial masters may Object, I said, let them, she almost smiled. It was the closest I had ever seen her come to it. We walked to the trial chamber together. The corridors were full of nobles moving toward the viewing galleries. Many of them stopped when they saw me. They whispered. Some of them looked angry. Some of them looked curious. None of them looked amused. At the doors of the chamber, Kaelin stopped. She could not come further. She turned to me. She said, Sergeant Hale, I have served the imperial family for 20 cycles. I have seen many champions. I have seen 2 empresses. I want you to know that whatever you do today, I am glad you came here. The Empress has smiled more in the last 2 months than in the last 2 years. That is not nothing. I said, thank you, Kaelin. She said, do not die today. I said, I do not plan to. I walked into the chamber. The trial of devotion was held in the same dome chamber as the trial of wit, but it had been transformed. The center platform was gone. In its place was a round stone altar, low and broad, with 4 ceremonial chairs arranged around it. A small fire burned in a bowl at the center. The court was packed. Every noble house was in attendance. The galleries were full. Zyra sat on her raised seat at the far end in the deep purple robes of ceremony with the full imperial crown on her head. Her face was a mask. She did not look at me when I entered. That was part of the act. I did not look at her either. The 3 other champions were already in their chairs. The Tryon, the Kaver, and the Melari. They wore ceremonial robes, not uniforms. Their faces were calm. I saw their eyes, though, and I saw something in them I had not seen before, a distance, a softness. They had already begun the mental preparation for the rite. They were no longer quite themselves. I took the 4th chair. The oldest trial master stepped forward. She raised her voice. She said, we are gathered today for the 5th trial of the Reven, the trial of devotion. Each champion will now demonstrate their devotion to the Empress by undergoing the rite of becoming. The rite will bind their loyalty to the Imperium in a way that cannot be undone. The champion who demonstrates the purest devotion will advance to the final trial. Let us begin. A younger trial master stepped forward with a silver tray. On the tray were 4 small cups of blue liquid, 1 for each of us. She began to walk around the altar, placing a cup in front of each champion. The Tryon received his cup first. He lifted it and held it over the fire. The Kaveran received the 2nd cup. It did the same. The Melari received the 3rd cup and held it in her many small hands. The younger trial master came to me. She placed the 4th cup in front of me. She stepped back. The oldest trial master said, champions, you will now speak the words of devotion and drink. You will speak them in the order you have drawn. Champion of the Tryon, you will begin. The Tryon began to speak the ceremonial words. His voice was deep and musical. He was saying he would renounce his old loyalties. He was saying he would embrace the Vihaloran way. He was asking the spirits of the Imperium to reshape his mind in their image. When he finished, he raised the cup and drank. His shoulders sagged, his eyes closed. For a long moment he did not move. Then he opened his eyes again, and the expression in them had changed. The rite had begun to work. The Kaveran spoke next, then the Melari. Each of them drank, each of them changed. Their faces were still their own, but something behind their faces was different, quieter, smaller. The oldest trial master turned to me. she said, champion of Earth, it is your turn. I stood up. The court fell silent. Zyra did not move, but I could feel her watching. Every noble in the chamber was watching. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. I stepped back from my chair. I did not pick up the cup. I walked slowly around the altar toward the open space in front of Zyra's seat. The trial masters looked at each other in confusion. The oldest one said, champion, you must return to your seat and speak the words. I said, with respect, trial master, I am not going to speak those words, and I am not going to drink that cup. The chamber erupted. Nobles began to shout. The trial masters stood frozen. Zyra did not move, but I saw one of her hands grip the arm of her chair very tightly. I raised my voice over the noise. I said, I'm invoking the oath of the bound blade. The shouting stopped. It stopped immediately, like someone had closed a door on all the sound. Oldest trial master stared at me. Her eyes went wide. She had not expected this. No one had expected this. The oath of the bound blade had not been invoked in more than 1,000 years. Many of the younger nobles had probably never even heard of it. The second trial master found her voice. First, she said, that law is not used. It is ancient. It is barely valid. I said, it is valid. I have read the text. It was written by Empress Selene, the 5th in the 11th cycle of her reign, and it has never been repealed. It remains in the legal code of the Imperium. I can cite the exact section if you require. The trial masters looked at each other. I had just demonstrated in front of the whole court that I knew their law better than most of them did. Zyra had made sure of that during the 10 days. The oldest trial master recovered. She said, even if the law is valid, it is not for the champion to invoke. The Empress must accept the oath. I turned toward Zyra. I looked at her for the first time that day. I said, Your Majesty, I wish to swear the oath of the bound blade to you. I wish to swear my life to your safety for as long as I live, without claim to title, without claim to rule, and without claim to your house. I wish to serve as your shield. Do you accept my oath? Zyra rose from her seat. The chamber was silent. She stepped down from her raised platform. She walked across the chamber. She stopped in front of me. She snorts was taller than me, but she lowered her head just a little, so her eyes met mine. I saw everything in them: fear, hope, love, relief, gratitude. She said in a clear voice that carried through the whole court, Sergeant Marcus Hale of Earth, I accept your oath. I knelt. I did not know all the Haloran words for the ceremony, but I had learned the key ones. I said them. Now carefully, I placed my service knife on the stone floor in front of me, handle toward her as the old text required. I spoke the words of binding. I spoke my name. I spoke her name. I spoke the words that said I would stand between her and her enemies, and between her and time, and between her and fear itself, for as long as I drew breath. When I finished, Zyra picked up my service knife from the floor. She held it in both hands. She touched the flat of the blade to my shoulder, then to the other shoulder, then to the top of my head. Then she returned it to me. I stood up. I sheathed my knife. It was done. The trial masters were arguing among themselves in quick, low voices. The oldest one finally turned back to the chamber. She said, the oath of the bound blade has been sworn and accepted By ancient law, Sergeant Hale has removed himself from the competition for the position of consort. He has also removed himself from the ability to claim any house, any title, any political seat, or any inheritance from the crown. He has chosen the oldest and narrowest path available to a champion of the Reven. This is permitted. The trial of devotion is concluded for him. The silence in the chamber cracked open into a roar of confused sound. Some houses were cheering, many were shouting in outrage. A few were sitting very still, looking like they had just watched the ground shift beneath them, which it had, because in one moment I had become something they could not use, could not threaten, and could not remove. A bound blade was sacred. No house could touch me without breaking the oldest law in the Imperium. No house could bribe me into a political position because I had renounced all political positions forever. No house could marry me off to their daughter for alliance because I was bound to Zyra for life. I was a wall around her, a wall they could not go around, could not go over, and could not take down. Zyra returned to her seat. She raised one hand. The chamber quieted. She said, "The trial is concluded. The champions who completed the rite will recover in their chambers. Sergeant Hale will accompany me. This court is dismissed." She stood. She walked out of the chamber. I walked out with her half a step behind her right shoulder, which was where a bound blade was supposed to walk. Kaylin fell in beside me as we passed her station at the door. She said nothing, but I saw her hands. They were shaking a little. Even she had not been sure I would do it, or maybe she had been sure, and the shaking was relief. We walked to the private chamber where Zyra and I had spoken the night of the trial of sacrifice, the room where we had talked about childhoods and books. She closed the door behind us. She turned to me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "Marcus, you did it." I said, "I did it." She said, "You just changed 1,100 years of tradition with one sentence." I said, "That is what you asked me to do." She said, "I asked you to survive. You did more than survive." She walked to me. She stopped in front of me. She reached up and put her hand against my cheek. She said, "You chose me in a way that no one has ever chosen an empress before, not for a crown, not for power, for me." I said, "Zyra, I have been yours since the night in the transport. I just had to find a way to say it that the houses could not break." She kissed me. It was the first time. It was not a political act. It was not for the court. There was no court here. There was only her and me, and the small fire in the hearth, and the light coming in through the windows from a city that was already different because of what I had just done. When she stepped back, her eyes were wet again, and she was smiling, a full smile. The first real full smile I had seen on her face. She said, "There is still one more trial. The 6th is not counted. The 7th is the final, the trial of dominance. In that trial, the remaining champions duel for the final right to the crown, but you are no longer competing, so the trial will be between the other 3. Whoever wins will claim the consort position." I said, "Then I have not saved you from the consort." She said, "You do not understand. By invoking the oath of the bound blade, you have broken the Reven itself. The oath can only be sworn if the Empress accepts." I accepted, which means I have publicly chosen a protector over a consort, which means by the same ancient law, the Reven is suspended I stared at her. She said there will be no consort. There will be no new ruler taking half. My throne, the houses have no opening. They have no pawn to crown, they have only me, the empress, and my bound blade, standing beside me for the rest of my reign. I said, you knew this when you told me about the oath. You knew this was what it would do, she said. I suspected. I did not know if the trial masters would accept the legal argument, but I had a team of scholars working on it for 10 days. By the time you walked into that chamber, they had prepared every citation, every historical precedent, every piece of the law you might need. If the trial masters had objected, I was ready to produce the scholars in front of the entire court. I would have made it politica.